How's it, everyone? Welcome to another court checklist right here on OpenCourt. So I know this is going to probably be a pretty unpopular video, and I know I'm probably going to hemorrhage some subscribers, but I hope you guys can respect my opinion. So on today's court checklist, I'm talking about 5 popular strings that I don't really like. Now, these are all polyesters. I use mostly polyesters. And there's also going to be a common theme with these polyesters. So if you enjoy these strings, that's great. You're probably a different type of player than me. You probably look for something different out of a string than I do. So let's get into the 5 strings that I don't really like. Number 5, let's just start off with a big one that I know is very, very popular, and I don't hate it, but at the same time, I don't really enjoy it either, and that is Yonex Hyper G. Now, before you come at me with your pitchforks and smashing that unsubscribe button, I said earlier, I don't hate it, okay? It's just a little bit too springy and it's a little bit too unresponsive. When I strike the ball with the Hyper G, I don't really feel comfortable and confident, and I don't really know where the ball is gonna go. The response is not as crisp as Tourbite. Tourbite is one of my top 5 favorite. So when I tried out Hyper G, I was excited and I was a bit let down. I was a bit disappointed. But I know it's a very popular string. A lot of people like it because it's predictable. For me, it's not quite predictable. It's predictable in the sense for most people in that it's very dead. So when they swing out at the ball, they know the ball is going to stay in. For me, I want a predictable string where I know exactly where I'm going to hit the ball because I hit for corners, I hit for the sidelines, I hit drop shots. I just don't really feel confident doing that with the Hyper G. And I also felt the Hyper G was a little bit stiffer than a lot of people expected. Even though the Tourbite has a stiffer, higher stiffness rating, I felt that the Hyper G actually hurt my arm a little bit more, which, you know, I might have just got a bad set or I might have just strung it poorly, but I've used it twice and I don't love it. But if you like it, hey, stick with it. Hyper G is a very popular string and objectively, it's very good. Number 4, another popular string, Yonex Polytour Pro. Now, I've said in the past, Yonex and I don't really gel that much in terms of their strings. Their rackets are starting to kind of grow on me, but the Yonex Polytour line, I only really enjoy Polytour Fire, that's my favorite, and maybe the Polytour Strike, which I reviewed recently. The Polytour Pro, you know, a lot of professionals use it, supposedly, for example, like Nick Kyrgios, and a lot of my friends love it, but I don't really like the Pro because it just has no response. It's just super muted. When I hit the ball with the Polytour Pro, I have no idea where the ball is gonna go, and it's a traditional round poly. It doesn't get a whole lot of spin. A lot of people rave about the snapback. I don't really feel it. The Polytour Pro is mushy and dead and unresponsive. I can't hit aggressively with it because I feel like the balls might just fly to the fence, and at the same time I can't hit drop shots with it because I don't get that feedback in my arm. So Polytour Pro, I'm sorry, I just don't really like this string. Number 3, I have to apologize to Rafael Nadal and Stan Wawrinka, but I don't like Babola RPM Blast. RPM Blast is super dead, super muted, and for me, it drops tension very fast. I don't know why so many people like this string. It has a very high spin rating, but the coating wears off really quickly, and for me, the spin drops off very fast, the tension drops very fast, and so I really feel like RPM Blast is probably at its best only for a couple of hours, and even then I don't really like it personally because it doesn't have that lively and predictable responsive feel that I covet in a string. It feels nothing like Alu Power or Tourbite. It's very dead, it's very muted. For that reason, a lot of people like it because they can just swing mindlessly at the ball and it'll go in with the spin and the muted response. But I do not like RPM Blast. I've tried it in multiple Babola rackets. I've tried it in a hybrid. As a hybrid, it's okay, but that's probably because the other string is holding it up a little bit, but I'm sorry. RPM Blast is a string that I will never use again because I just can't hit the type of shots, like the touch shots and the corner shots that I really like to go for. Number 2, another string that's very popular to RPM Blast. It's considered the budget version of it, and that is Vocal Cyclone. Vocal Cyclone, in my opinion, gets a little bit more spin than RPM Blast, but they both have very similar feels. They're very muted, they're very dead. When I hit the ball, I feel like if I hit the ball at the 12 o'clock position or down by the throat or even in the sweet spot, the response doesn't really change. I can't really feel where I'm hitting the ball, and so I'm very tentative going for sidelines and corners with the Vocal Cyclone. The only place I really like the Cyclone is on the serve. It's good for hitting slice serves, and what I like about the Cyclone is that it comes in very, very thin gauges. I've tried the Cyclone down in a 19 gauge. I think it was a 110 gauge, which got a lot of spin even out of my Speed Pro 1820, but at the same time, the response is not something that I really mesh with. I want something that's crisper and livelier, and I feel more connected with the ball, and it'll give me the confidence. A lot of people like Vocal Cyclone and RPM Blast because it gives them the confidence to swing out. I want a string that will make me connected to the ball with every single strike and make me feel confident hitting high risk shots, and unfortunately, Cyclone does not do that for me. And lastly, number one. By the way, I should have said this earlier, this is in no particular order. I don't hate number one more than I hate number 5. This is just an arbitrary order. So the last string on my list of 5 strings that I don't like is head, hawk, touch. I'm a big fan of head strings and head rackets. Head is my favorite brand, but unfortunately the hawk touch, just like all the other strings on this list, is too muted, too unresponsive, and a bit too mushy. I think this is the softest string in my 5, but it just absorbs the shock really well, but because of that, it just doesn't have any feel for me. I've tried hawk in a hybrid, I've tried hawk touch in various tensions, and I just can't mesh with it. It feels very similar to Polytour Pro. It also feels very similar to Technifiber Ice Code, which I like Ice Code a little bit better than hawk touch. And I know a lot of people like to use hawk touch because it's comfortable for their arm, but I don't like it because, first of all, I don't have arm problems, so that's not an issue. I'm looking for something firmer and crisper and more responsive. The hawk touch, a lot of people like to use it with natural gut. That's curious. I would like to try that maybe one day, but hawk touch is not something that I would put in a full bed anymore because it just doesn't give me that response that I like. So I'm sure you guys noticed the common theme with my 5 strings. I don't like muted and dead strings. I want something that's crisp and lively. You've seen my top 5 polyester strings, so these are basically the opposite. I don't like muted dead strings, but I know a lot of people do, and I'm sorry if your favorite string is on this list. If you like these strings, stick with it. Stick with what works for you. So thank you for watching another edition of Court Checklist right here on Open Court. If you guys like this content, be sure to overhead smash that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you on an Open Court.